U.S. Supreme Court today heard oral arguments in what could be the case of the year. 26 states are suing to have President Obama's health care reform law declared unconstitutional and thrown out. NBC4's Steve Handelsman has the very latest on day one of what will be 3 days of arguments.
Hi, Colleen. Thanks. Good afternoon from the U.S. Supreme Court. Members of the public camped out here starting Friday for a shot at about 120 public seats. They swapped in and out, and the arguments here today were not restricted to the Supreme Courtroom. Outside the High Court, both sides rallied, backers of Obama health care.
We want all Americans to be able to opt for the health care that they need rather than the health care that they can't afford.
In a new poll, 2/3 of Americans want Obama health care thrown out.
I believe it violates the fundamental nature of the relationship between a government and a citizen.
Can anything that happens out here, can public opinion affect the rulings in there? Justice Clarence Thomas said no. He called this kind of thing background noise, not a distraction. But the 9 justices recognize this is a blockbuster case. 3 days of oral arguments. Today's was on the Obama fine for refusing to buy health insurance. Is that a tax? Conservative Justice Antonin Scalia.
There's at least some doubt about it.
Liberal Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
And this is not a revenue-raising measure because if it's successful, nobody will pay the penalty.
If the fine is ruled not a tax, the High Court can move immediately to the constitutionality of what the White House now calls Obamacare. Rick Santorum showed up, hoping for a ruling repudiating the plan pioneered by his Massachusetts rival.
The reason that I talk about Obamacare and its impact on the economy and fundamental freedoms, and Mitt Romney doesn't.
The justices talk tomorrow about the requirement to buy coverage, the mandate. It's the main complaint about Barack Obama's health care plan. Santorum here today as a reminder, this U.S. Supreme Court could have an effect again on a presidential election. From Washington, I'm Steve Handelsman, NBC News. Colleen, back to you.
Steve, thank you. More than 60% of Americans want the Affordable Care Act thrown out. Nancy Gomez is Director of Health Access. That's a group that helps Californians struggling with insurance. Welcome to the studio, first of all.
Thank you for having me.
You said earlier as we were watching this piece, you would love to be in the courtroom there. If you could say one thing to the justices, what would it be about affordable health care?
Well, I would tell them that there are millions of people already benefiting from the law. And, you know, people say that they're against or for it, and basically on ideological grounds. They really don't know what is in the law. For example, children can no longer be denied coverage for having a pre-existing condition. 2.2 million children in California alone. Adults that have pre-existing conditions who were not only priced out of the market, they were out of the market entirely, can now pay for affordable coverage through the state. Come 2014, insurance companies will no longer be able to deny coverage.
Doesn't California have a pre-existing condition already so that people cannot be denied if they have some sort of prior condition?
Mm-hmm. There is a plan that California has, but it's limited, and it has a $70,000 a year cap. And if you have a pre-existing condition, you meet that pretty quickly. So it's not the answer to our problems.
When we talk about state, how many people or what percentage of the population in the state of California does not have health care?
The state of California has 7 million people who are uninsured prior to the passage of health reform. Now, with the Affordable Care Act, there are about 350,000 newly enrolled people who qualify for Medi-Cal, which is the state's program for the poor. There are about 8,500 people who qualify for the new pre-existing condition insurance plan. Not only qualify, they're enrolled and receiving care.
You touched on cost just a minute ago, the fact that it's out of reach for so many people because the cost is prohibitive. What will this Affordable Health Care Act do for that?
Well, it will make sure that insurance companies spend 80% of their profits on actual health care. And if they don't, they have to rebate their customers. And it also regulates them so that they cannot arbitrarily increase your rates. Usually they increase rates up to 3-4 times a year.
If you were advising someone who perhaps might be in the market or has to be in the market for health insurance at this point, what would be your #1 advice so that they don't get scammed or don't overpay?
I would say look at the Affordable Care Act, look at the state website. There are many options for affordable care, and you don't have to pay an arm and a leg anymore. And that's what we stand to lose if the Affordable Care Act were repealed. We would be back at the mercy of the worst practices of the insurance industry.
Do you ever envision the fact that we might see 100% coverage?
I think that would be ideal. There's obviously a large segment of our population, the undocumented, that are not covered, and that just doesn't make sense from a public health point of view and from a humane point of view.
There is a large portion of the population that doesn't like this idea. I believe they think you can walk into any county hospital and you can't be refused coverage. Is that in fact the case?
It is in fact the case that you cannot be refused medical care, but once you're stabilized, you're out on the street again. So if you're a person that has a chronic condition, you never actually get cured, you just get stabilized and sent on your way. But you know, every other industrialized country in the world has some form of coverage, even for foreigners. You can walk into, God forbid you have an accident, you walk into a hospital and you're covered. And they don't even, have billing departments for you. So, we have a long way to go still in the United States, but this is definitely a step in the right direction.
Who will benefit the most from this? I guess conversely, who suffers the most at this point? Is it younger people? Is it seniors?
It's people, there are, again, 40 million uninsured people in the United States. They either do not have access to health insurance because the cost is prohibitive, or because, again, they have a pre-existing condition that doesn't let them even open the door to the market, if you will. Children are suffering. There's a lot of access issues because we do have the best health care in the world, but we don't have the best health care system.
Why is it then 26 states are against this whole idea of health care as presented by the White House?
Again, because it's an ideological divide. People are not looking at what's in the law. They're looking at it as either a Republican plan or a Democrat plan, and they're against it solely based on that. I don't see how a Republican can say, for example, well, let's go back to the days when children were denied for pre-existing conditions. I don't see how they can sell that.
I'm not sure they've actually said that. Have they actually come out and said that?
If the Affordable Care Act is repealed and we go back to the status quo. So you believe it falls
down along the lines of Democrat or Republican here?
Yes, unfortunately. And it is unfortunate that they're not talking about the merits of the law, the cost savings in the long run because of a focus on prevention.
But the states don't break it down that way. The states are not Republican or Democrat, and that's why they're taking them to court.
Oh, yes, they are. The state attorney generals are Republicans or Democrat. In fact, the 26 states that have filed lawsuit are either Republican attorney generals or have Republican governors.
Okay, we'll agree to disagree on that. But let's talk about the average person here in California. What's it going to cost them in terms of health care? If they don't have health care now and they are forced to, in fact, purchase it or have it at some point, what's it going to do to them?
What it's going to do to all of us is, we're going to have a sense of shared responsibility. If you can't not afford your premium, there are going to be subsidies provided by the federal government. So there's some people who are going to have 50% of their premium, for example, covered by the federal government. So there's a limit on what you're going to have to pay. And that's something that, we already do. We pay for car insurance, we pay for homeowners insurance because it benefits everybody. And when people are not insured and they get into an accident, as you said, the hospital has to see them, and it's the taxpayers who get stuck footing the bill.
So you think it's all about prevention, and that could decrease the cost of health care down the road for everyone.
Of course, and that's something that we definitely have to focus on starting in children. We have an epidemic of diabetes, of obesity. If we tackle those problems when kids are young, then we won't have adults who are chronically ill.
How do you see this case in the Supreme Court shaking down? I mean, they have 3 more days of oral arguments. How do you see this ending up?
I believe the Supreme Court will uphold the law. It is constitutional, and I don't see them repealing the entire law or even part of it. But I think what could change the outlook is the election and which president we're going to have and what type of Congress. They would have much more power to change the law, I think, than the Supreme Court.
Okay, thank you so much for coming in and breaking it down and explaining it for us.
Great. Thank you very much.